Beirut. So those intensifying Israeli strikes causing misery across Lebanon. We've had more forced evacuation orders by the Israeli army for parts of southern Lebanon. Can you talk us through all the latest strikes and what is going on, particularly in the south, when it comes to the displacement?
Yeah, a forced evacuation order or lack of doesn't necessarily mean you are protected. One village that was hit early this morning, Ser al-Gabia, is north of the Litani River. That is the line that Israel has selected and has told people to evacuate north of that. But this town is north of that. It was hit by an airstrike and 19 people were killed, members of two families, mainly women and children. There were other evacuation orders in other parts of southern Lebanon that have also been hit by intense airstrikes overnight and this morning, and also there's been a strike here in the southern suburbs of Beirut. Much earlier on, Israel issued evacuation orders for 4 villages along sort of halfway down between the Litani River and the Israel border. This area is used by Hezbollah as a sort of a second line, supplying frontline troops. They're strategically positioned, quite high villages. Israel wants control of them. Hezbollah wants to keep hold of them for understandable reasons. Hezbollah wants to try and pull Israeli ground forces in to try and take them on the ground because it knows Israel has air superiority, but believes it can battle Israelis face to face on the ground. 2 Israeli soldiers have been killed when Hezbollah targeted a bulldozer, we're led to understand.
OK, Bernard, thank you for that. Bernard Smith there for us with the latest in Beirut. President Donald Trump has threatened to expand the U.S. operation on Iran. He spoke to reporters earlier on board Air Force One.
We've accomplished more in 1 week than anyone thought possible. We've wiped out their Navy, 44 ships. We've wiped out their Air Force, every plane. We've wiped out most of their missiles. You see, the missiles aren't coming much anymore. We've also hit their manufacturing areas where they make the missiles very hard. Their drone capacity is way down. And we've hurt them where it hurts. Including about every form of leadership you can have, we've wiped out.
You still expect up to 6 weeks total?
I don't know. I never reject time, whatever it takes. But the military is almost non-existent, if you look. We could hit the military itself very hard, but maybe we will, maybe we won't. We haven't made that determination.
Well, the U.S. military has released figures about the joint U.S.-Israeli operation Epic Fury. After more than a week of conflict, it says around 3,000 military sites have been hit or targeted in Iran. 43 ships and boats belonging to Iran's Navy have been destroyed. And in Iran, the Red Crescent says over 9,500 civilian units have been severely damaged. Central Command also says Iran has launched more than 2,700 missiles and drones since the conflict began. A little earlier, the Iranian Foreign Minister Abbas Araghchi said his country would not surrender despite demands from President Trump. Speaking to U.S. media, Araghchi said Iran will keep fighting.
This is what he asked previous time, last year in June, that when Israel started to attack us, President Trump used the same phrase, unconditional surrender. That was the tweet he made. And that didn't happen. We resisted, and after 12 days, Israelis asked for unconditional ceasefire. So we never give up, we never surrender, and we continue to resist as long as it takes. We continue to defend ourselves, and we are defending our territory, our people, and our dignity. And our dignity is not for sale.
Let's bring in our chief U.S. correspondent, Alan Fisher, who is at the White House. So, Alan, it does appear that both sides are very much at loggerheads. What are the latest lines you're getting from the U.S. And U.S. President Donald Trump?
Well, clearly, he has been asked whether or not he intends to put troops on the ground. He said he wouldn't answer that question, but we know there are preparations being made, that planning is underway, that leave is being cancelled. These things you would expect, though, because the US is involved in a war in Iran, even if Mike Johnson, the Speaker of the House, won't actually use those words. Donald Trump will. Clearly, he believes that they're ahead of schedule. He says they've destroyed the Air Force and the Navy. He says they've severely limited their ability to build ballistic missiles. They have attacked the nuclear facilities too. But while being ahead of schedule, Donald Trump may be looking for a way out of this as well, because he understands that this war is not popular with the people of the United States. It's got 30% approval. And the idea of putting troops on the ground, that number goes down significantly. And so Donald Trump will continue prosecuting the war. He believes that they're doing a great job. And of course, they're still moving men and material into the region, which suggests that this is going to go on for some considerable time. Is it going to be the 4 to 6 weeks that Donald Trump has talked about? It may not last as long as that. But depending on how the Iranians react, it may continue for some considerable time yet.
OK, so Alan, you mentioned that the Americans claiming that this is going better than expected. So what is your sense then of how long the Americans can actually go on with this war?
Well, they say they have the weapons, but what is interesting is that groups of arms makers were here at the White House on Friday for a meeting with Donald Trump. He says they have enough weapons to carry out this war, but he did extract from them a promise that they would quadruple their output over the coming weeks, which suggests that stockpiles are running low. Now, Donald Trump has said that they gave a lot of weapons to Ukraine, excuse me, but he has changed that since he came into office, and they've managed to build up their stockpiles again. Donald Trump talks in terms of 2 weeks, 4 weeks, 6 weeks. There's never any clear timescale or any real reason behind it. It's clear that they've inflicted a lot of damage to Iran, but it's also clear that the United States didn't expect Iran to continue fighting quite as hard as they have for as long as they have. So how long does this go on? That's all in the power of Donald Trump at this point.
OK, thank you for that. Alan Fisher, our chief US correspondent, with the latest from the White House. An Iranian military official says that Tehran will intensify its offensive against Israel and the US starting Sunday night. Sirens sounded across central Israel and Tel Aviv after the Israeli military detected missiles launched from Iran. Medics say 3 people were injured in central Israel, one of them seriously, after debris from an intercepted missile fell to the ground. Well, Iran's president said earlier that his remarks about halting attacks on friendly countries were wrong.
The enemy has a distorted understanding of my words. They want us and our neighboring countries to be at war and are seeking to create discord between us and other nations. If they attempt to invade our territory from any country, we will be compelled to respond to that aggression. However, this response does not imply that we have a conflict or disagreement with that country, nor do we intend to upset its people. We are simply forced to act in defense. The more pressure they exert on us, the stronger our response will be.
Meanwhile, attacks have continued across the Gulf region, which hosts US military assets. Authorities say a government building in Kuwait City caught fire after being hit by a drone. Fuel tanks at Kuwait's international airport were also targeted by drones. Officials in Bahrain say at least 3 people were injured during an Iranian missile attack. The United Arab Emirates says the death toll from Iranian attacks has now risen to 4. Its foreign ministry has released a statement saying the country is in a state of defense in response to the brutal and unprovoked Iranian aggression. It added the attacks continue to violate international law and the United Nations Charter. The ministry also stressed that the UAE does not seek to be drawn into conflicts or escalation. The Secretary of Iran's Supreme National Security Council says that the leadership remains united in the conflict with the US and Israel. Ali Larijani has rejected President Trump's suggestion he will be involved in choosing Iran's next leader.
Our leaders are united on this issue and have no disagreements with one another. We have no divisions among ourselves in fighting Israel and the United States. It's true that Iranians may have differences among themselves, but they are still Iranian, and they stand with Iran. The idea of breaking Iran apart will not gain their cooperation, and besides that, they have seen your history of interventions in the region. Now, what is Mr. Trump saying? He is saying he contributed to what happened to the leader of Iran, and that he made him a martyr. He says he thinks he should contribute to the selection of the next leader of Iran. In my opinion, that shows he's a very backwards person.
OK, let's take a look at potential candidates who might replace the Ayatollah Ali Khamenei. There's Mojtaba Khamenei, who is Ayatollah Khamenei's second eldest son. While he holds no formal position, he does wield immense influence. He was a top aide to his father and said to have strong ties to the Revolutionary Guard. But he would be a controversial choice because it will be seen as a hereditary handover. Then there's Ali Reza Arafi, who is the director of Iran's religious seminaries and Friday prayer leader of the holy city of Qom. Khamenei had repeatedly appointed him to senior positions. And there's Ali Khamenei, the grandson of Ayatollah Khamenei, Iran's first supreme leader. He is a cleric, though he does not hold a major political office. His family legacy could make him a notable figure in discussions about Iran's future leadership. OK, we have joining us from Tehran, Hassan Ahmadian, Associate Professor at the University of Tehran, and here in the studio, Al Jazeera's Ali Hashim, who has reported extensively from Iran. Ali, let me start with you, because we are now hearing that there has been some sort of consensus reached on who will succeed the Ayatollah Ali Khamenei. What are you hearing on this first?
Well, we've heard a lot about choosing and announcing. Yet the most important thing now, regardless of the names, because there are many names, in Iran, any cleric could have the chance to become a supreme leader. But the main issue is that what are the characteristics of the next supreme leader? What's the criteria that the experts, the clerics in the Assembly of Experts are going to use to choose a new leader? First of all, a new leader for Iran at the time of war is different from a new leader for Iran in the normal times. That's why there should be a different leader, a person who is capable of mobilizing people at the time of war. Probably, if you ask me my point of view, a younger leader than the one before, someone that can be able to appeal to people. At the same time, someone who's not controversial. So there are many characteristics that could be taken into consideration, plus something that could be related also to the culture. Now, with respect to, we saw the names of Mr. Mojtaba Khamenei, Mr. Ali Khomeini. Also, there are other names like Hassan Khomeini, like we mentioned also Mr. Arafi. However, there is also the turban, whether he is going to be from the family of the Prophet, with a black turban, or he's going to be a white turban who is just a normal person. This also makes a difference. At the time of war, there is revenge. Personally, I would see that maybe the Iranian clerics would want to see someone coming from descent of Prophet Muhammad to be the next leader.
Let me turn to you, Hassan. It is quite complex, isn't it? There's a lot of criteria involved when it comes to choosing the new leader. But we heard, Ali, there has to be this acknowledgement of what the people in Iran are going through right now. What is your sense? Are we going to get a more moderate voice in charge, or is it going to be the opposite, given we're in a time of war?
Well, I think, a public appeal is one criteria that a leader in Iran, when chosen, needed to have, and I think moving forward it will be the case. A leader cannot impose on the population. And so the more closer to the middle ground a person is, the higher his chances of being elected leader by the Assembly of Experts. Now, of course, as Ali mentioned, the lineage of the person is important. His views, his capability of bringing people from across the spectrum into back in the system and back in the leadership would be, have immense importance for him to be elected. So a person should be appealing personally, appealing to the public, appealing to political factions in the country to be elected. And so I think that narrows really the numbers. It's not as in everyone can be the supreme leader. I think these criteria really narrow the numbers for the Assembly of Experts. We hear about the names. You mentioned some of them. It seems that the numbers have narrowed and they have came to a conclusion. But we are waiting. It's about time, I think, for them to announce it.
Ali, you were nodding along to what Hassan had to say there, but I think it's worth stressing here, Iran is a country that is very divided politically. How difficult is it going to be to get a new leader that appeals to both sides?
Well, this is a moment of war. As I said, it's not a normal times. This is a time of war, and at the end, whoever is going to be a leader should be able to lead, should be able to mobilize. And I think the Iranians right now are taking into consideration that this could be a long war, and it's not going to be something that's going to end soon. At the same time, the leader, whoever is going to be elected, is under the threat of being killed immediately by the United States and Israel. So there are a lot of internal, within the establishment, concerns that should be taken into consideration. As for the street, yes, as Hassan was saying, yeah, he should appeal to the street, but at the same time, we're not talking right now about someone who is moderate. We're not talking about someone who appeals to the United States. No, any leader who is going to be elected today is going to be confrontational.
Let me ask you briefly, Ali, because we've been talking a lot about what the Israelis have said. Any leader that is replacing Ayatollah will also be a target. Why the need to announce the name, then, of the leader? Why not keep it quiet?
Well, this is part of the system. The system in Iran wants to show continuity. It wants to show that it already ended one chapter and starting a new chapter. It wants a leader, a figurehead that is on the top of the system to be able to mobilize and to direct correctly towards where Iran will be going in the future days.
OK, thank you to Hassan Ahmadian joining us there from Tehran, and of course Ali Hashim. OK, I want to take a look at some of the day's other news making headlines. Police in Norway say an explosion at the US Embassy in the capital Oslo may be linked to the conflict in the Middle East. Police say the incident happened in the early hours of Sunday at the entrance to the consular section. Officials say the blast caused minor damage and no one was injured. Norway police say they are working closely with the US Embassy. President Donald Trump has launched a plan to combat drug cartels and Chinese influence in what he calls the natural sphere of the United States. At a meeting with leaders from Latin America and the Caribbean, Trump offered military support to countries willing to cooperate and warned of force against those that refuse. Al Jazeera's Latin American editor Lucia Newman reports from Miami.
U.S. President Donald Trump turned his attention to his own hemisphere, albeit for only an hour, at his Miami Golf Club, where he'd invited 12 conservative Latin American heads of state to hear about his new regional initiative. It's called Shield of the Americas, a newly formed U.S.-led alliance to stop undocumented mass immigration, crime and drug trafficking, and foreign interference in the hemisphere, a reference to China. Trump offered his guests lethal U.S. military force to hunt down criminals.
We'll use missiles. If you want us to use a missile, they're extremely accurate. Pum, right into the living room. That's the end of that cartel person. But we'll do whatever you need if you want.
Right-wing governments were on hand to join what he's named America's Counter-Cartel Coalition.
But conspicuously absent were the leaders of Latin America's two largest countries, Brazil and Mexico, the latter being the country from where the lion's share of drugs that go into the United States come from, not to mention Colombia and Peru, where almost all of the cocaine is produced. The problem is the leaders of those countries are not considered friends of the U.S.
And neither is communist Cuba, which he says is next on his list.
But our focus right now is on Iran, and we'll do that I would say, what will you do? Take about 2 days off, Marco? No, he won't. Maybe an hour. He'll take 1 hour off, and then he'll finish up a deal on Cuba.
There was no chance for the Latin American leaders to speak, only to listen.
We share a hemisphere and geography. We share cultures, Western Christian civilization. We share these things together. We have to have the courage to defend it.
A meeting that sent a clear message that the so-called Dunroe Doctrine offers some carrots as well as sticks to restore U.S. hegemony in the Western Hemisphere. Lucia Newman, Al Jazeera, Miami.
In Ukraine, there are growing fears the war could slip into the background as global attention shifts to the Middle East. Audrey McAlpin reports.
Ukrainian and U.S. flags are still sold together as souvenirs, but the relationship isn't what it once was. Alexei says he has noticed a difference.
It was time when Ukraine was number one in whole newspapers everywhere.
Now, with the new war in the Middle East, there are concerns here about how global attention might shift away from Ukraine and threaten Kyiv's supply of vital air defense missiles from its allies. Ukraine's president is now offering an exchange.
We would like, with the help of countries we can name and those we cannot, to cover our deficit in Patriot missiles. And in return, we can provide the corresponding number of interceptors.
But whilst in their own war, Ukrainians worry whether they have the weapons to spare.
To give assistance where our help isn't actually needed, when drones fly all the way and fall onto the roofs of our houses. That's very strange.
I think we need to deal with our own problems first and only then provide help to others. Otherwise, we'll give everything away to others and end up with nothing ourselves. In my view, we are not in a position of abundance.
Alexei doesn't know how many more of these he'll sell, and it may seem like a small detail, but it reflects a bigger uncertainty. With the U.S.-Ukraine relationship already under strain, many here wonder what shifting global priorities could mean for Ukraine's future.
If all countries think just about themselves, we don't have weapons from other countries and start of the war. So probably Zelensky make right, but who knows? We will see.
Audrey McAlpine, Al Jazeera, Kyiv.
Colombians head to the polls on Sunday in key elections just months before presidential
decisions and the decisions that he has taken and have supported them throughout. That is my strong view. I think he has taken the right decisions in the UK national interest.
Welcome to BBC News. Well, let's bring you more of that interview that the Foreign Secretary, that Cooper, has done with Laura Kuenssberg this morning. When pressed on whether the UK-US special relationship is in trouble, the Foreign Secretary said the countries work closely together on a range of issues and will continue to do so. She also said that Prime Minister Keir Starmer is acting in the national interest, adding that it was important to learn lessons from what went wrong during the Iraq War. Let's have a listen to what she had to say.
Well, the job of the British Prime Minister is to take decisions in the UK national interest, not in the interests of any other country, but in the UK's national interest. That's what Keir Starmer has done every step of the way, both in terms of the initial decision not to be involved in those initial strikes that took place, and also in the decision to provide defensive support when we see Iranian strikes on partner countries where British citizens are residing. Those are decisions in the UK's national interest. And it won't surprise you that, obviously, we don't agree with President Trump on every issue.
But what's your message back to him? I mean, he is publicly, for the whole world to see, telling off the British Prime Minister. This is meant to be our closest ally. What do you say to him?
Well, again, I would say that this is about what's in the UK's interest. It's for the US president to decide what he thinks is in the US national interest, and that's for him to do. But it is our job as the UK government to decide what's in the UK national interest. And that doesn't mean simply agreeing with other countries or outsourcing our foreign policy to other countries. We have to be able to take those decisions. Of course, we have a long, deep, important security partnership with the United States, but we also have some issues where we disagree in the British
but
interest.
We're seeing these pictures here of President Trump and Keir Starmer laughing and joking as they did in the Oval Office, the King handing over this invitation to come and have tea with the King. This is a public and serious spat between the Prime Minister and the man who's meant to be our closest ally.
Well, you'll forgive me that I focus on the substance rather than on social media posts, and I've learnt this long enough to know.
So should we ignore him? Should we just ignore
the
what
social
Donald
media
Trump
post?
says?
If you follow every single social media post, you spend an awful lot of time doing social media posts in response.
Well, the President seems to spend a lot of time doing social media posts, so should we ignore it?
I think the substance we should concentrate on is what is the right thing to do. There is obviously a very serious conflict now underway in the Middle East, in the region, and we've seen these strikes continuing from the Iranian regime on so many different partner countries. It's why we're providing the Typhoons, the F-35s, the jets to the region, and air defences, strengthening air defences as well. It's also why we're working immensely hard to help British citizens return home from the region despite all of the airspace and restrictions that are in place at the moment. It's that substance I think we should focus on, because that's the most important thing to the UK.
But the relationship between leaders does matter, does it not? And in fact, the government has been highlighting how good a relationship Keir Starmer has with Donald Trump for many months, telling us that only Keir Starmer has been able to get such a good deal with the Americans because he's got a personal relationship. That seems to be in trouble. Do you deny their relationship's in trouble?
Well, of course, our countries work closely together, and of course the Prime Minister works closely with the President on a whole series of issues.
He must
and you're
be
right,
furious about
there's
this.
issues around the tech partnerships, around trade, on a whole series of different things, as well as our ongoing security partnership will continue to do so.
Doesn't the evidence suggest, though, that actually Donald Trump might have a point? And your former leader, Tony Blair, also told an event this week that actually the UK should absolutely have been alongside the US from the start.
Well, I know there are some people in politics who think that we should just unquestioningly agree with the US, whatever. I know there are also some people in politics who think that we should never agree with the US and we should never go along with anything, any joint action.
But what do you
I just think
Tony
neither
Blair,
of those
your
things.
former
well,
leader,
this is my point.
You were a
to
minister
him.
in his government.
Yeah,
What would you say to him?
And this is my point to him. I don't understand there are people who think we should just unquestioningly do so, and that I just think is not in the UK's national interest. I also think, having been a minister in the last Labour government, I also think it is important to learn lessons from what went wrong in Iraq, and to recognise whether that is about ensuring that the purpose for any action that the UK becomes a part of, and just recognising that all of our decisions need to be about what is right for British citizens and in the UK's national interest. No other country would say, look, we want to just outsource our foreign policy. Everyone would say that actually what you need to do is to take decisions ourselves. That's what Keir Starmer has been doing. And I think he's right to stand up for Britain and Britain's interests.
But whether it is Donald Trump or Tony Blair or other people whose assessment you might not agree with, is there not a point that the UK has responded slowly here? You know, 7 days ago, the Defence Secretary sat in that chair and told everyone watching that the UK was not involved and was not involved in these strikes. By the end of that day, the Prime Minister had popped up and said, oh, actually, America can use our bases. And if anybody really wants evidence of the slowness of response, you were told that this attack was likely weeks ago, and the ship that's meant to protect Cyprus, HMS Dragon, is, as we speak, still in the dock in the United Kingdom. You have been slow, have you not?
So I think there's two separate issues there. The first of all is that...
No, this is issues about the speed of response.
And I want to deal with each of them. So you've got, I think, two issues about the nature of the response. The first thing, I think, is that these were two separate decisions about not providing the support or being involved in the initial strikes that the US and Israel took. And we had also continually argued that we wanted to see the negotiations, the diplomatic processes continue. Those were difficult, and don't get me wrong, those were difficult, but we were pursuing those. So there was a first initial decision. Then, once we saw the reckless nature of the Iranian response, which frankly shocked all of the countries across the Gulf who are now being targeted, I mean, they were shocked by the nature of the Iranian reaction, then it was right to respond to that targeting by Iran against partner countries. There's a second question that you asked, though, about the military response and the nature of the defensive response. So I think, as the Defence Secretary told you last week, we had actually pre-deployed fighter jets, Typhoons and F-35s, air defence radar to the region, to Cyprus, and strengthened support in Qatar,
but the ship
including
to protect Cyprus is still in the dock in Portsmouth.
Well, the most important
still there.
The most important thing, I think, has been that those fighter jets that are already in operation, and the 400 additional personnel that we pre-deployed before this conflict started. Since then, since the conflict, you're right, we are preparing HMS Dragon to go to the region, and we've already now deployed additional Typhoons, additional Wildcat helicopters on air defences as well.
HMS Prince of Wales, are you sending the aircraft carrier to the region?
So I won't comment on further operational
well, you've
issues.
just told us about some operational
But there's the decisions that have been taken. I'm telling you about the decisions
carrier?
that have been taken that are in place. Obviously, you'll also may be aware that as part of the Munich security speech, the Prime Minister announced the carrier strike group would be heading to the High North. There are obviously a range of security issues we face. So,
hasn't the government actually put the UK in the most awkward position of all? We're neither taking part in this war in the wholehearted way that some of our closest allies would want us to, but you're also facilitating the war in a way that many people watching will think is dangerous and wrong.
But, I think that reflects the complexity and the reality of the kinds of security issues we face. And I think most people across the country know these things aren't, there's not just a sort of simplistic world out there that we can just pick and choose from and think that all of our decisions are easy.
Are we at
the reality is that it is complex, the situation that we are facing. So, of course, we didn't provide the